My name is Deborah Smith-Gregory, and I serve as the president of the Newark NAACP. As a community service, the NAACP branches of Irvington, Montclair, Newark, Oranges, Maplewood, and the Urban League of Essex County have collaborated to provide some very important information to registered voters in Essex County. This pandemic called COVID-19 has literally turned our lives and our world upside down. And as our government grapples with flattening the curve, ramping up testing, furiously working to find a vaccine, and allocating financial support to citizens, we still have responsibilities that must be attended to. One of them is voting, and it only costs you your time. On May 12th, 2020, 6 municipalities in Essex County will conduct elections. It is our right, our privilege, and our responsibility to vote. We have invited Christopher Durkin, Essex County Clerk, to walk us through the vote by mail process. For many of us, like myself, we may vote in every election, but may not have had the occasion to vote by mail. We want to ensure your ballot is not discarded because of errors you've made. Chris Durkin was elected to the office of Essex County Clerk in November 2005 and officially sworn in January 2006. His office oversees elections for Essex County residents, the largest county in the state. Chris has served in various capacities of public service, including as Director of Human Resources, a teacher, a job placement officer, and a detective. He lives in Essex County with his wife and 3 children. Welcome, Chris. We also have Ryan Haygood, who will be on shortly. Ryan is celebrating his 5th year as the CEO and president of the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. Under his tenure, New Jersey Institute has been pivotal in influencing statewide policies that impact and empower residents of color. Ryan recently spearheaded a statewide collaboration to get legislation passed that restored the right to vote for parolees and probationers. The Voter Restoration Act went into effect on March 17th, 2020, at the very time we were deep in shock and awe from the deadly coronavirus. Nearly 83,000 New Jersey citizens now have the right to vote for elected officials in all elections from the local to the federal. Ryan also has a legacy of public service, having served as Deputy Director of Litigation at the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. One of his highlights was defending a core provision of the Voting Rights Act. Ryan lives in Newark with his wife and 2 sons. And Chris, while we're waiting for Ryan to pop in, we're going to start with you. Can you please tell us what municipalities will hold elections on May 12th and for what offices, and walk us through the vote by mail process?
Well, thank you, Deborah. I really appreciate your friendship and for you inviting me to this forum. Deborah is a woman of courage, a woman of conviction. She is kind and dedicated. She told me that she's retired, but she really isn't, because she has a great mission to uphold, and I appreciate her. And it's great to be here with Ryan Haygood, who is a social justice empathetic warrior. Ryan is on the front lines fighting for fairness and equality. I saw Ryan speak at a PSC&G power luncheon. He made a great impact on me. He talked about how voting is the great equalizer in our communities, how voting is a freedom, not just a right, but a freedom that strengthens our communities. When a person votes, that person becomes a stakeholder in our communities. As Deborah said, we have a very important election on May 12th. We have 6 municipalities in Essex County, by far the largest amount of voters in the state, just about 300,000 voters. The state has about 700,000 voters voting on May 12th, so we're almost half of the voting around the state. The 6 municipalities are Belleville, Irvington, Montclair, Newark, Nutley, and Orange. In Belleville, there are 4 ward races. Each individual races, and it's a vote for 1 council member for each of the 4 wards in Belleville. For Irvington, Irvington has both a ward race in the 4 wards of Irvington. They also have a school board race. And they're electing 3 members to the school board and 1 member for the unexpired term of a person who left office. Also, they're voting on their budget in Irvington, which is very important, the budget question. In Montclair, what's interesting about Montclair is Montclair and Newark are the 2 only municipalities in Essex County where they elect their full government in 1 election. So Montclair is electing their mayor, they're electing 2 at-large council people, and 4 ward council people. So Montclair has a new government, for the most part, every 4 years. And then in Newark, there are a school board race where 3 candidates are being elected to the Newark School Board, and you have a choice of yes or no to the school budget. And then in Nutley, there's 5 commissioners that are going to be elected on May 12th. Orange, we have the mayor election, choice for 1 for mayor of Orange, and there are 3 at-large council people to be elected in Orange for May 12th. Right here in front of me, I have a ballot. This is the outside carrier portion, which comes to you. We started mailing ballots 10 days ago to voters in those 6 municipalities. Inside the carrier envelope, there are materials. There are the ballot, and I have an orange ballot because that's where I was born. We have a notice as to why this election is being held 100% vote by mail. There are no polling places on election day. And this was done through an executive order of Governor Murphy, Executive Order 105, mandating that the May 12th election, whether it be school elections or nonpartisan elections, be 100% vote by mail. And then we have the certification envelope, which has instructions of what you need to do, step-by-step instructions. And then on the front, it has the certification portion. And this acts as the poll book. So when you go to the polls and vote in person, you sign the poll book. They pull up your name and your address and your signature, and you have to match your signature that you are who you say you are. Your signature matches how you're registered to vote. This is the same thing. This is verifying your signature in the system, in the statewide voter registration system, that you are the same person. You're filling out, you're printing your name, your address, and your signature, which is very important to go back with your ballot. So your ballot goes in this certification envelope. It is sealed. This remains, do not detach, just as long as it goes back in the envelope. That's what's most important, because the Board of Elections verifies your signature to your registered signature. And then it goes, this certification envelope with the ballot inside goes into the return envelope. This is the return envelope. It is prepaid postage, so no need for a stamp coming back to the Board of Elections, to the county. So this goes inside the return envelope. the voter prints their name on the upper left-hand side, prints their name and their address, just as they do when they're sending out a letter. And then below that, that is only to be used. And if you wanted to fill that out, it's not the voter could fill that out if they'd like to. It's not wrong or incorrect as the bearer portion. The bearer portion is really for a registered voter of Essex County who is going to bring back your ballot. So the bearer would need to fill that portion out before they brought it back in person. So if they wanted to bring it back in person to the Board of Elections, a registered voter can bring back up to 3 ballots by law and hand them in personally, including their own. So it's their own and 2 other ballots that they can hand in personally, but they must fill out that bearer portion before they walk into the Board of Elections so that their ballot will count. 2 ways that your ballot will not count is if you did not sign, put your signature on the certification envelope, or did not include it in the return, with the return ballot, or if someone brought back your ballot and did not fill out this bearer portion, because this is the chain of custody of this ballot so that the election offices know where the ballot has been. I know that Deborah asked earlier about if someone receives a ballot to their residence that no longer lives there at the residence. What they can do is they can give the ballot back to the postal carrier. They can write on it, return to sender, not at this address, so that it goes back to the county, so that voter then becomes inactive in our system. They don't get taken out of the system. They become an inactive voter. And then if they miss 2 federal elections, that is when they're removed from the voter rolls. The registration deadline has already passed for the May 12th election, but that's the registration deadline. That's not the change of address registration. So you're still able to change your address. If you moved from one municipality, let's say you moved from Maplewood to Montclair, and Montclair has an election and you are already a registered voter, you can vote in this election. You just need to make sure your address is changed in the system through voter registration at the Hall of Records, and then we're able to send you a ballot or hand you a ballot inside the office of the county clerk for you to vote. So I think I covered, I know we have a lot of questions that will be in the second portion of this, and I know Ryan will be up next, but I would just like to give you a story, a brief story about how one vote matters. My father was in an election for the Vailsburg Democratic chair position way back in the 70s, and he was running against a gentleman who was the parks director for Essex County, who was very powerful being the parks director. And my father could count votes. And he knew that after counting the votes before the election that he was going to lose by 1 vote. So he went to visit a husband and wife who each had a vote in the election. And he sat down, and the husband worked for my father's opponent, the parks director. And he knew that he couldn't vote for my father. But he turned to the wife and he said, I know your husband can't vote for me, but I need your vote. And I'll bet you my opponent did not ask you for your vote. So the opponent assumed with the husband came the wife. On election night, the husband voted for my father's opponent. The wife voted for my father, and my father won by 1 vote. And that 1 vote, a few years later, my father was able to be elected the chairman of the Maplewood Democratic Committee. And because of that 1 vote in that living room, my father, a few years later, was able to be elected Essex County Democratic chairman. And because of that 1 vote, a few years later, he was elected the New Jersey Democratic state chairman. And then in 1989, because of that 1 vote, there was an election for national chairman. And my father was supporting a gentleman from Minnesota, and he had a dinner reservation with Ron Brown from Harlem. And he met Ron Brown, and he hit it off with Ron Brown. And he decided to support Ron Brown. And he famously said, My word is my bond until circumstances change. And the circumstances that changed was he met Ron Brown. And he supported Ron Brown. Ron Brown became the first African-American Democratic national chairman. Later on, became the Commerce Secretary under Bill Clinton. Tragically died in a plane crash. But it changed the world because of that one vote. And my father would often talk about how one vote is that impactful. And one other brief story, during Hurricane Sandy, the election of Hurricane Sandy, people didn't know if polls were going to be open on election day. And a woman, 90-year-old woman, came to the Hall of Records to vote in person by mail in our office on the Saturday before election day. And she was online for 3 hours. Before I realized she was online for 3 hours. And she told me, she reiterated the battle cry of the women's suffrage. She said to me that my vote is my voice and the voice of all those people who fought and struggled so that I may have my voice. So I will end there, and I know that there'll be a Q&A in the next half hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome, Ryan. We seem to be having some tough technical difficulties with this being live streamed, but we will absolutely make sure that it does get out. Ryan, we did introduce you, and we talked about the fact that you spearheaded a collaborative effort to get legislation passed for the restoration of voter rights for parolees and for probationers. And what we would like for you to give us is some highlights of the Voter Restoration Act. And in light of this terrible crisis that we're currently experiencing, give some ideas about how to ensure and empower those thousands of citizens who can now vote in the upcoming elections, particularly the November election, which is just 6 months away.
Sure. So thank you so much, President Smith-Gregory, for hosting this important conversation. It's really part of a broader conversation that's happening in this country around, how do you empower people to access their democracy while in the throes of a pandemic? And so it's so good to be on with our dear friend, Chris Durkin, to have this conversation now as we shelter in place in our homes. And so I am mindful of the context in which we're having this conversation. That is that New Jersey, along with the rest of the country and the world, is fighting a devastating public health crisis. And I think that crises like these have always exposed the cracks in our country's foundation. And these cracks are causing earthquakes in Black and Brown communities. And so I think about how we confront these real challenges that we now face, how we're humbled by the enormous challenges that are presented to us in this difficult moment. But I also think we can be inspired by what we, to your point, President Smith-Gregory, what we accomplished together, our collective advocacy together accomplished around democracy in New Jersey in just the past legislative cycle. So I want to lift up a few things and then talk about how we make those things real, even in this difficult moment. So together, we achieved the passage of historic legislation that will restore the right to vote to 83,000 people on probation and parole. This is a population that's nearly the size of our capital city of Trenton. And this was a right that was first denied to people with criminal convictions in 1844. This was the year that New Jersey restricted voting to white men only. And so thousands of people across this state joined and collectively advocated to build a New Jersey that is in fact 1844 no more. That law became effective on March 17th. Together, we also secured automatic and online voter registration to make the promise of democracy real and accessible to people across New Jersey on a bigger scale. We've been urging New Jersey to make the online voter registration piece ready in advance of the July 7th primary. Together, our collective advocacy brought an end to prison-based gerrymandering. This is really considered the modern-day 3/5 clause, where people who were incarcerated were previously counted as residents of their prison facilities as opposed to their home communities to which they are most likely to return. for purposes of legislative redistricting. And finally, together, we secured $9 million for Census 2020 outreach to help ensure that hard to survey communities of color won't go undercounted, underfunded, and unrepresented. It's worth noting that in New Jersey, half of all Black people in the state live in what are considered hard to survey communities. In Newark, where I live and President Smith-Gregory live and a number of folks watching live, Newark is number one in the country for having the highest percentage of Black folks living in what are considered hard to survey communities. And so it is especially important for us to ensure that everyone is counted in the 2020 census. In fact, you all can do this at home, online in less than 10 minutes. I've got my t-shirt on encouraging us to be counted because we matter. All of this remarkable progress was made possible in just one legislative session, even as we face one of our most difficult national moments, and as we face the challenge of making these historic reforms real in New Jersey as we confront the devastating effects of the coronavirus pandemic. I have been thinking a lot about how we've been building in New Jersey democracy from the ground up in our communities. We're not waiting for it to trickle down from Washington, D.C. And I think that it's important, especially now that we continue this work, even as some folks are urging us to return to normal. In many ways, normal was not acceptable for us. We've got to create a new normal, which among other things connects more people to the power of democracy in New Jersey. So President Smith-Gregory asked me to say a word about the huge win that we collectively achieved that restores 83,000 people to the ballot box who are on probation and parole. And that's a significant move in the legislative history of New Jersey. But if we don't register those folks, we have only really achieved a victory on paper. So the upcoming election is May 12th. Voter registration has closed for that. The election behind May 12th is the July 7th primary. So we're urging folks who have not yet registered to vote, particularly those who are newly able to vote on probation and parole, to register today. July 7th primary requires people to register by June 16th, but folks shouldn't wait to do that right now. We're urging people to register to vote today so that they can vote for the July 7th primary. To Chris's point, and I'll close here, elections are won by very, very narrow margins. And I can't think of a time in the history of New Jersey where as many people as who've been enfranchised by the passage of the Restoration Bill have come on to or able to come on to the ballot. 83,000 folks can easily make the difference in any election, statewide elections, certainly in the local elections. Some of the local elections are really, really important, and we don't often pay as much attention to those as we ought to. Last year in the Newark school board election, for example, 2019 school board election, though it was a historic election after we recently regained local control of our schools, fewer than 5% of registered voters in Newark participated in that election. And so part of this conversation is how do we ensure, even in the throes of a pandemic, that we get greater participation in our democracy, not less. We can't afford less. We've got to ensure more. And that has to include us registering to vote today for those of us who aren't. Thank you so much for hosting this conversation. Look forward to the questions.
All right, thank you. One of the questions that we received is, I misplaced my ballot. What should I do?
Deborah, that's a great question. And we've already gotten 300 requests for a second ballot. So there are three ways, maybe more, of why a person would need a second ballot. They might have never received their ballot in the mail, or they might have mistakenly thrown out their ballot, or they spoiled their ballot in some way. They can go to my website at essexclerk.com, and we have a second ballot request form that is on the website. They can download that form, fill it out, take a picture of it, and email it to us or fax it to us. For people who don't have that capability, we're accepting requests through email, name, address, date of birth, and we're priority mailing ballots to voters requesting a second ballot. That second ballot request form is also on each municipal website, municipal town website, which they can download or view the information that needs to be included, returned to us. Also very important that I did not talk about originally was the disabled voter. They are able to access the ballot box two ways, the disabled voter, either through email. There's an email system set up where they can email vote, where they have to sign off that they are in fact disabled, or there's a voting machine available on election day at the Hall of Records that will allow disabled voters to utilize, whether they're visually impaired, the audio of the ballot, and they can access the ballot that way. So either through email or through in-person voting on a voting machine that has audio capabilities for a disabled voter. And that's also on our website that they can contact us. It explains about disabled voting.
Chris, can I ask you, Chris? So I'm fortunate I received my ballot today. Thank you. Thankfully. Can you say a word? So if a voter by, say, May 11th hasn't received his or her ballot, what do they do in that circumstance? Okay,
so the shame of that is we're limited then to in-person, where the Hall of Records will be open, the county clerk's office will be open. Someone can come in person the day before Election Day, the day of Election Day, and apply for a second ballot. We will hand them a second ballot. They can vote on that ballot and hand it in personally 2 floors up at the Board of Elections to be counted. So that'll be all day until 8 o'clock at night. So that takes the place of provisional voting. On Election Day, if, for instance, you did not vote on your vote by mail ballot and your page is stamped vote by mail voter, or if you don't appear in the poll book, you're given a provisional ballot to vote on. Well, there's no provisional ballot voting. This is strictly vote by mail election. So it's through the county clerk's office that you need to request that vote by mail ballot. Now, if you're disabled and not able to utilize the internet voting or in-person voting, you can send a messenger for your ballot to the county clerk's office, who will bring your ballot back to you, and that messenger will then be the bearer of that ballot to bring back to the Board of Elections to hand in personally.
So just so I'm clear, Chris, as a last resort, if a voter doesn't receive his or her ballot by May 11th, they can come to the county clerk's office, they can vote on a regular ballot, and it'll be counted as if it were a regular ballot that was cast.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, we will be open straight through the day before the election all day. Election day will be like a polling place, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. to access a ballot, a second ballot request.
Chris, we have a question. I just moved in February and I have not changed my address yet. What should I do?
So explain. So they moved. You said they moved.
They moved in February, but have not received a ballot yet. What should they do? Okay, so they were already registered and they moved. Is that? Yes, they were already registered and they moved in February, but they haven't received their ballot yet. What should they do?
So that's a great question. So on the second ballot request form, there are 2 entries of addresses. The first entry is, what address are you registered at? The second address is, where do you want your ballot sent? So obviously that person was already sent a ballot to the previous address. They now need that ballot sent to their new address. So it allows them to do that by putting their registered address and the address they want their ballot to be sent.
Okay, great. A senior citizen, and I know you addressed this, but senior citizens are anxious about making sure that their votes are counted. And senior citizens who live in a senior building but cannot get to the post office, what should they do?
Well, there's a couple options. They can, a lot of times they're able to put their mail, their return mail back in their own post office box, their mailbox. So just like you take your mail out of your mailbox, you can put return mail in your mailbox for the postal worker to take back. Other than that, they need to have someone do it for them, if possible. But I think that's the best way, is to return it back to their mailbox for the postal worker to return. And I know we've had some issues in housing complexes with ballots not being directly delivered to someone's mailbox. And we're in contact with the post office to make sure they're delivering directly to each post box for the voter, so that they don't have to look for their ballot on a shelf or in a bin. That's most important, is that the ballot goes directly into their mailbox, and they can put their ballot back into their mailbox for their post office worker to return their ballot.
Can you say a word on that point, Chris, about so once the ballot is mailed, is there a way that voters can track the progress of the ballot to make sure that it's both received and ultimately counted?
Yes, so there's two ways. One is on the Secretary of State's website, New Jersey Secretary of State Division of Elections website. There is a sign-in. The difficulty with that is you have to know your voter ID number to register. So you could call voter registration, get your ID number, register, and then you could track your ballot to see if and when it was received by the Board of Elections. The county clerk's office also distributes files based on requests of everyone who's returned their ballot. So we've already started since Thursday evening emailing files of who returned their ballot for each municipality, by district, by ward, showing all of the returns and the date that it was scanned back in. Other states are not as private as the Division of Elections website, where you have to know your voter ID, register, and then you can track your ballot. You're able to track it a little easier in other states. But like I said, I'm able to, if someone wanted the file from me, we could email the file to anyone that requests it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Chris, just so that earlier I said that Essex County is the largest county in the state. Just to give our residents an idea of the magnitude of this effort for registered voters to vote by mail, how many ballots have been mailed by the Essex County, by your office?
Okay, so think about this. We have 532,000 registered voters in Essex County. We just mailed out 10 days ago 296,000 ballots to voters. So 296,000 ballots to those 6 municipalities.
Wow, that's a tremendous task, to say the least. We have a couple more questions. I'm not sure that if I am registered to vote and I did not receive a ballot, should I call the Essex Clerk's office?
Yes, so you could either call the Essex County Clerk's office at 973-621-4921, and the phone numbers are also on our website at essexclerk.com to call us, or call the Commissioner of Registration's office, which is 973-621-5061. And we or the Commissioner of Registration's office will tell you if you're registered, where you're registered, and how to remedy receiving a ballot.
Now, if new voters who are 18 years old and they just registered to vote, I know that the Newark Board of Education had a tremendous voter registration push for their seniors. those new voters, if they have not received the ballot, should they also call your office?
Yes, they could call the office, or if they've not received their ballot, they can request a second ballot through the second ballot request form. And it might be that their ballot, like you mentioned earlier, was sent to a previous address. I'll give you another example of how they set this system up for the all mail-in election. If you had previously been on the file to get ballots for every election, your ballot was sent to where you requested it to be sent previously. So for instance, if you were in college last November during the general election and you were on the forever vote by mail file and you requested it to be sent to your college, your ballot was just sent to your college, which is closed. So that's an example of that voter needing to tell us, I need another ballot and it needs to be sent where I want it to be sent or where I am currently living.
Yes, because we really want to encourage all of our first-time voters, especially college students, high school seniors. Please, please get out and vote. It is really, really important. The final question. I was given an early release from prison based on the virus. I want to vote. Can I vote in the May 12th election?
So they would have to be already registered to vote because the registration is over and registration deadline. But that's not the change of address. I keep getting back to that. If they were registered anywhere in New Jersey, we could then have their registration changed to their current address if they just filled out a voter registration change of address form. And that will allow us to get them a ballot. But the voter registration deadline has passed.
Can you say just on the registration point, recognizing that folks don't all have printers at home and can't print out a voter registration form, are there ways for folks to request a voter registration form, have that sent to their homes?
Yes. So we would mail, and we do that all the time with vote by mail applications, just like we would do or do with voter registration forms. We mail based on request. We receive calls, multiple calls every day for people asking us to send them vote by mail applications. We even send the voter registration forms, as does the Commissioner of Registration, through the mail.
Thank you. We're going to close out. I just want to say to the viewers who are now able to get this on Facebook that we will repost the entire episode that started at 2. It's going to be about 45 minutes long so that you can get benefit. We want to educate and empower our residents. And just based on this is our first time attempting to do this and learning as we go, we sincerely apologize to everyone who tried to get online and was not able to see the broadcast. So with that, I would like to get closing comments from each of you. We'll start with you, Ryan.
Sure. So I just want to thank you again for hosting this conversation really about democracy and how we access democracy in the midst of a pandemic. It requires, just as this Zoom meeting did now, some flexibility, some tenacity, and some commitment. So I thank you all. I really do want to lift up how significant it was that together we changed a law in New Jersey that will empower 83,000 people previously barred from voting on probation and parole to now participate in our democracy. And though voter registration has closed for the upcoming May 12th election, it's open for the July 7th primary. And so I urge folks, as Chris shared, to register to vote. You can ask for a registration form to be sent to your home so you don't have to print it out. If you can't do that at home, we urge you to do that. Register today. And if you are registered, participate in the May 12th upcoming elections if they're happening in your city. They're very important. The local elections are among the most important because it's true that change, when it happens, it has always happened from the ground up in our communities, not from Washington, D.C. down. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Deborah. I appreciate the invitation to this forum. I want to thank Ryan Haygood for all of his great work. I mean, incredible. Just in the last year, as Deborah brought that up, enfranchising so many more people, which makes everyone part of the community, a stakeholder in the community. It's so important that we exercise our right to vote, because whether or not we like it or not, elected officials respond to who votes. That's the constituency that they respond to. That's who they listen to most of all. And we can say all we want that it shouldn't be that case, and that's not fair, but that's life. So we must vote. We must get involved in our communities because we're all in this together. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of Thurman Dancy, President of Irvington NAACP, Al Pelham, President of Montclair NAACP, Thomas Puryear, President of the Oranges Maplewood NAACP, Vivian Cox Frazier, CEO of the Urban League of Essex County, and myself, Deborah Smith-Gregory, President of Newark NAACP. We urge all residents in Belleville, Irvington, Montclair, Newark, Nutley, and Orange to mail in your ballots now. Your deadline is May 12th, but we recommend that you make sure you drop your ballot in the mail at least by May 10th to ensure that it is received. Your vote is your power. For more information on vote by mail, you can contact the Essex Clerk's Office. Again, that website is www.essexclerk.com, all one word. For more information on the activities of the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, you can go to their website, www.njsij.com. For NAACP updates, you can go to the Newark NAACP Facebook page. We just thank Chris and Ryan for educating and empowering our residents. We will have this session broadcast on channel 68 in Newark and 34 in Montclair. And if we have some other public access channels, we'll make sure that we get the word out where it can be reached. A special thanks to Interfaith TV for their technical assistance. Thank you. And we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Be safe, frequently wash your hands, practice social distancing. Don't forget to wear your mask in public. Our humanity is our commonality. We need each other to survive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to, before we completely go off, I'd like to share a video that Essex Clerk has put out.
Because of the coronavirus, the May 12th elections will be an all-vote by mail election. You cannot vote at your polling place on Election Day. Belleville, Irvington, Montclair, Newark, Nutley, and Orange are mailing election ballots to all registered voters. Vote your ballot and return it. You can place your ballot back in your own mailbox for your postal employee to pick up and return for you. Prepaid postage has been attached, so you don't need a stamp. Let's vote, and together we can make democracy work.